from the First Street Studios in South Tampa, Florida, it's time for another round of Last Call 76 with your host, Dan, Jay, and behind the camera, the one and only Jess.
Jay, lots of discussion just happened. UFC 295. Now we have another 2 weight division champion. What do you think about it? What precedence does this set now for these fighters going back and forth? On our last show in our pilot series, we discussed this. Is this the wave of the future, or are we just in this time frame where all of this is working? What do you think?
It is a wave of the future, but it's not unprecedented. I mean, we could go back to BJ Penn and Randy Couture that were fighters that stepped up in weight class and won all their belts. What makes this different, though, is this Alex Pereira, who has won, the titles in light heavyweight now and welterweight. Mm-hmm. He needed 7 fights to do it. He's in 7th fight in his UFC career, and he's won belts in 2 different divisions.
It's unbelievable.
That's quick.
With that many fights. Now, let's not get it twisted, though. I mean, he was a kickboxing champion over 30, 40 fights. So.
He wasn't some ham and egger that just walked off the street to South Tampa and put on some gloves.
But still, at that level of the UFC, to already have 2 titles in 7 fights, that's unheard of.
Exactly. I mean, think about that. He's no bum. We've seen a lot of kickboxers get in there and they flounder miserably. I mean, Black Diamond was garbage in the UFC, but, this guy's champion in 2 divisions, so he's a special talent. I was actually at his UFC debut at Madison Square Garden. I knew right then and there.
You were in the press conference.
I was in the press conference,
when you got to do how many questions on that?
7 or 8, yeah.
That's awesome, man.
So, I mean, I knew this guy was a special talent then, but I didn't realize he's this special. Wave of the future, I think this is going to continue to happen because, look, we've got so many fighters in so many divisions, but it's what moves the needle. It's what sells the fights. And, this wasn't supposed to be this light heavyweight title fight, if you remember, but there was a ton of circumstances that fell away. The champs got injured and then, there was a draw in fight. So every circumstance moved in its way for him to get this opportunity. But he took advantage of it, man. He beat a guy in Jiri who was knocking everybody out left, right, and in Mariho. He earned his stripes, and he's a stud.
Yeah, I think the only concern I have, though, it just didn't have the power behind the media in him yet, because the buildup, like the Conor, the Amanda Nunes, the Ronda Rousey, it doesn't have that champ, even though Ronda Rousey I was just using it as, or like the John Jones, the Daniel Cormier, because they've been around the league so long, UFC. Yeah. So it just seems like this one just flew under the radar, if that makes sense. And then his coach was the champ, just a champ before that.
And that's what they put
Glover, right?
Right, Glover.
I don't know what to say. I think it's a great accomplishment. Pretty much puts him in the Hall of Fame. But let's talk about the other fight.
Right, real quick. One more thing I want to add. UFC did drop the ball on this, and I love the UFC, but they could have sold this fight because Jiri took the light heavyweight title off his mentor, Glover Teixeira.
Yes.
And they did not mention that one iota. And here's the thing about Pereira before we move on to the next one, because I really want to touch on that. No, Pereira 7 fights in his career in the UFC. He does it with this and his legs. He doesn't do it with this. And that's tough. And he's not, he's Brazilian. So, the broken, and I'm not saying this to be rude or ignorant or anything like that, but you know where I'm going with this. Yeah. Right? He's not that larger than life personality. Let's move on to the other fight, though.
I just to finish on that, you touch on it, though. I just think he hasn't been in long enough on enough cards to let the world see him.
Right.
I mean, they've seen him, especially the Adesanya fight. Right. That's a 1-1 kind of get up there, right, in the real world. So that's exciting coming back. But then Adesanya says he's retired now. So we don't know. But let's talk about the other fight. That was exciting. Let's just be real. Who expected it, though?
Tom Aspinall. 8-9 fights in the UFC. I have not seen a heavyweight this overlooked in a long time. All this guy has done is win, win, win.
Decisively.
And he's not beating ham and eggers and jabronis off the street. He's beaten some decent heavyweights along the way. But we don't talk about, even going into this fight, which was by circumstance. That was supposed to be John Jones and Stipe Miocic. We're going to talk about here in just a few more minutes in this video. All right? He was thrown in there, and he was supposed to be the sacrificial lamb. A guy that nobody was beaten, nobody was coming close to.
10 days.
10 days notice, and everybody was scared to fight. This guy goes in there and knocks him out in 1 minute and 9 seconds. This guy is dangerous, and nobody gave him his due. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic.
The only fight is when he was injured. He injured his knee.
Curtis Blades, who's no joke to lose to, when he blew out his knee, circumstantial. He was winning the fight, and he blew out his knee. It happens.
Yeah. I don't know. I think he's dangerous. He's a problem. So we're going to see. Does this mean now John Jones stays up? Or does he go back to 205 now? I don't know, because this guy's a fighter. But John Jones can handle his business. So maybe he does stay up there with Jackson and, Brandon Gibson striking wise. But this guy is powerful, he's fast, and he's motivated.
Sure, but double question for you, though, and I'm going to add two parts to this. Do you stay up at to heavyweight where you got Aspinall, who's heavy, he's motivated, he's quick, he's got good boxing, he's decent on the ground? Or do you move down to 205 with the human wrecking ball who has set the UFC on fire in Pereira? Tough choice. It's not like either way. It's not like the old days in the UFC where John Jones had his pecking order, all right, I'm superior to these guys and I know it. He's got no clear-cut path. And there's one other avenue I want to throw in there. What about Stipe?
I know.
The greatest heavyweight of all time in the UFC. I'm sorry, the best of the best. What's his future? Where does he go?
It's interesting. We'll pick it back up as we get some more fights down on the cards. But this was kind of a really shocker in 295. I was pretty excited about it. What about you? I mean, it wasn't bad. It was a good card.
This is what makes UFC great.
Yeah, it does. Okay, thanks, guys, for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a look anytime you get a chance. We'll try to keep putting up good content for y'all. This episode of Last Call was brought to you by SJP Snapshots and Minx Inc. Clothing and Apparel.